No, it's okay. Okay, well, everyone, welcome to the Altmetrics workshop. This is the first time we're doing this presentation, and we really want to encourage questions because we know this is a new and emerging area. My name is Megan O'Donnell. I'm one of the librarians here at ISU, and I have the lovely Emma Moles and Lori Pellick, who are also librarians, who are going to co-present with me different parts of the workshop. Because we only have one mic, we are going to take some breaks when we switch speakers. And like I said, feel free at any time if you have a question or if you need help with something, because we are going to do some hands-on part. If you're in person, please raise your hand. Either Lori, Emma, or I will come around and help you. If you're online, Kelly and Rano will be helping you. They're our online moderators. So first thing I'm going to show you is that there is an online guide that we've created for Altmetrics, and I want to show you how to find that. So if you can navigate to the Iowa State University homepage, which is iastate.edu, and then go to the library homepage, which is under academics, and it's the second choice library. And then you want to click guides on the front page. Once you're in the guides, it's pretty easy to find what we're looking for. In that search box, you just type Altmetrics. And go ahead and click the Altmetrics. Okay, so this is our guide. And so up at the top, we have the goals of this workshop. We're going to explain what Altmetrics are and hopefully increase your understanding of what they are and the potential benefits they give. Where they come from, which is often very confusing. And also how to make Altmetrics work for you, how you use them, and different ways to manage them. So go ahead and scroll down the page, and we're going to get to what are Altmetrics. So we'll give a little chance for everyone to catch up. So Altmetrics, I have a quote up here from one of the founders of the Altmetrics movement, that Altmetrics expand our view of what impact looks like, also of what's making the impact, and it matters because expressions of scholarship are becoming more diverse. When you think about this, it may not be readily apparent what that means because we're used to publishing journal articles, we're used to monograph publishing, things like that. But now that we have things that are online, they live digitally, we're actually publishing quite a bit of other things besides that. We're publishing videos, we're publishing course materials, we're publishing podcasts, we're publishing blogs, we're publishing all sorts of things. So what scholarship is changing, and how we distribute it has changed as well. So Altmetrics defined mean alternative metrics. It's a shorthand term. Sometimes it is referred to as article level metrics. I prefer alternative because that, once again, talks about only articles. Altmetrics are really beyond the article at this point. So one of the things to take home about Altmetrics is that it is a measurement of how people interact with your scholarship and research online. Altmetrics only work with things that live online. So instead, and they're an alternative measure of academic success, or maybe research, impact, reach, and also just interest in a topic. So how many times has your research been tweeted? How many readers did you get on your paper? Those are fast, those accumulate a lot faster than citations. So why do they matter? So because we've gone, like I said, we've gone beyond the printed page, we need to start thinking about how scholarship and research has changed. And maybe we need to start thinking about the different ways we are also measuring our productivity, our reach and impact. So when you start thinking about that, you have to start, well, how do I start measuring that? Altmetrics are a way to do that. And they are a new way of thinking about who's seeing my stuff, what are they doing with it, and also, can I change what I'm doing based off those interactions? So they inform not only what you do, but also other people of what you're doing. This is the part that's kind of funny, is how they work. Everything you do online can be tracked. We all know that thanks to the NSA this year, right? Thank you, NSA. They're probably tracking us right now. So Altmetrics work because you can track everything. This is actually a good thing. I will tell you right now, Altmetrics, the companies, are not interested in you as a person that much. because altmetrics are supposed to benefit the authors of things, which means that they just, the readers, the interactors, whatever you want to call them, they're interested in where they come from, maybe your level of education, things like that. They're not really interested, you know, what you do in your free time or what you're buying on Amazon. That doesn't matter for this. So they're not looking at you as a whole person. They're looking at you in terms as like how you're using the research. So don't worry about that. It's not scary. Altmetrics are not the NSA. So the cool thing about Altmetrics is they can answer questions like, you know, how many times was my paper downloaded? How many times did it come up in search results that people were doing? Because maybe I'm interested in seeing who else is doing searches on this topic. Was it covered by any news agencies? Were there any science blogs that picked it up, distributed it, made other people more aware of my research? How many people watched my video? Did it go viral? I don't know, with academic videos, maybe not, but you never know. And also what countries are looking at my research. That can also tell you how far the reach of your research is. That's something we really couldn't do before the internet and all these online interactions could be measured. So, and lastly, if my little frowny face. There is a little bit of confusion that Altmetrics is a thing. Altmetric is a company. Altmetric, the company, is only one place that is measuring altmetrics. They do make some of their data accessible to nonprofit communities, so actually ISU uses it in our digital repository, but they are not the be-all, end-all. They do not capture everything. That said, they do a really good job, and you will see their stuff on many places. Journals like Nature use them, so if you go into articles, you can click article level metrics. Altmetric, the company, is the one gathering them. So that's where they're coming from. But just know that you can collect your own altmetrics. Don't always rely on one company to do it. So, and just be aware that when you see that little colorful donut, which is I have on the right, that's coming from that one company. So, okay, I think we're going to switch speakers.
Hands over the microphone. Okay, great. So as Megan introduced me earlier, my name is Emma Moles. I'm, along with Megan's, a scholarly communication librarian here at ISU. So we're going to, from the guide that we've navigated to with Megan, we're going to click on the next tab on the left-hand side, which is where do altmetrics come from? Okay, so Megan sort of gave us the introduction to altmetrics, so now we're going to look at where these altmetrics are actually coming from. So they're being gathered from a few places. So if you just scroll down through this guide with me together, so the most traditional thing that we think about as scholarship, right, is our articles that are being published in a journal by a publisher. So a lot of publishers now are actually not only giving you that very traditional number of how many times your article has been cited or downloaded, but they're also giving these further altmetrics. So in this part of the guide called Publishers there, we can actually look at an example, and this is from PLOS. So if you just click on the center image, or follow along on my screen. So as we look down, it will tell us all this other information, right, where it's being cited, where it's being saved, where it's being discussed. So now we're seeing some of those platforms that we're familiar with when we talk about altmetrics, right? So we know this article, for example, is being discussed on Twitter with 809. So that's probably mentions, retweets, favorites. This article is also being talked about on Facebook. Not surprisingly, since it is an article about Facebook. So there's a way to pump up your altmetrics is write a paper about social media. We can also see it coming across on things like Mendeley. So this information is provided by the publisher itself. So if you had published with this publisher, you'd be getting those very traditional type article impact, but you'd also be receiving altmetrics directly from the publisher. On the guide, if you look to the right-hand side, there's more publisher examples there. So we've already looked at PLOS, which is that first one. You can also click in to see Nature. So if you're someone who has or is interested in publishing in Nature, this is something that that publisher provides. So again, tweeted by 6. This article is also picked up by 1 news outlet. All right, so that comes across in this sort of, I don't know, spinny icon. And that again is generated by that company, Altmetric, that Megan had mentioned earlier.
So if you want to find out
Yeah.
that one news outlet has picked it up, can you drill down to that one outlet?
Yeah, so the question was, so if you wanted to know where your online attention is actually coming from, can you see that? Yes, you can, and you can click into everything. Let's see here. What's that? Oh, yeah, I see right here. So everything is clickable, right? So the icon itself is clickable, and then it takes you into that Altmetric, the company's page, and then breaks down what that icon is actually showing you. Yeah, and so Megan mentioned this is a brand new article, right? Published a month ago. So there's more examples there on the guide on the right-hand side of other publishers. These are some big ones. There's certainly other publishers that are not mentioned here that would also provide you Altmetrics. These are just some pretty clear examples that we've selected to show. Okay, so now let's think beyond publishers. Where else can we gather Altmetrics from, right? So not all publishers provide those Altmetrics statistics for you. Also, you might be publishing something that's not going to go through a traditional publisher. So then what? All right, so you can also gather information through repositories. So here at Iowa State, we have a digital repository. How many of you who are in the room know that you have something that lives in our digital repository? Okay, so quite a few of you, great. Yes? Oh, that's a pretty good question. Anybody? Yeah, so the question was, if you are someone who is waiting, you have submitted a CV or an article to the repository, when that will actually get into the repository. I'm not sure. We can check that for you. Yeah, we can shoot an email to the repository coordinator, and that department will have that information. Great, okay, so the thing about the repository, right, so if you have something that lives in the repository, but also maybe at one time lived in a published journal, or it's a poster that you have that's in the repository and that's the only place that it lives. So as someone who has something in the repository, because you're an author, you're also going to have this sort of author dashboard. So if you're somebody who has things that live in other repositories, you probably also have access to statistics like this. So here's just a quick screenshot. Oh, sorry. So you can see down below, this is just an author dashboard sample. So when you're also going to gather Altmetrics, think about not only downloads from the article, but also if it lives in a repository, you also have access to more information, right? The number of times it's been downloaded through the repository. It gives you a nice little line chart, some bar graphs. If you're somebody who is interested in getting things into the repository and hasn't yet, there's information on the right-hand side about the digital repository. Okay, so another place, so far we've looked at publishers that provide Altmetrics for you, repository numbers that you can download, and also bookmarking and reference management tools also provide Altmetrics. So if you're somebody who uses Mendeley, Mendeley is probably the best example of this. So somewhere where you're gathering bibliographic records, they can also provide Altmetrics for you. So again, on the right-hand side, here's some examples of this. So here's an article in Mendeley. There's readership statistics on the right-hand side. This is actually pretty nice because it also is breaking down sort of by demographics what type of readers have been downloading your paper, which is nice to see. I will say we noticed here that one of the highest areas is PhDs and master's students, and that's not surprising. I think that's probably the user group that we see use bibliographic management tools the most. So if you're not somebody who has something in the repository or uses a bibliographic management tool, these next and last two concepts of where Altmetrics are coming from are sort of two of the most general ones. So for one thing, if you have a website that you've created that is either your personal website or a website that you are working on with a research project, or your research project exists as a website, so continue to think about gathering information on those websites. So something like Google Analytics can keep track of that. If you're someone who uses WordPress or one of the Google blogs, any number of things, you're probably already getting Altmetrics from that, right? So it shows you readership views, where your views are coming from, which posts have the highest views. So that's also something to think about. It's nice now because a lot of those create your own website sites do all of that for you, and they break down the numbers really nice. So just continue to think about that. If you have things on websites, that's also data that you can pull. And finally, social media and the social web. So we've seen throughout all of the examples, Twitter is really integrated there. So for those of you in the room, how many of you, the last conference you went to, tweeted at the conference? Yeah, great. So I see that too in the conferences that I go to. So a lot of people who are presenting at conferences now are either live tweeting their presentation or putting up the DOI for their own paper. And then as soon as they're presenting, it's in turn being retweeted, being favorited, and being captured on Twitter. So if you're not somebody who's been using Twitter and you're interested in Altmetrics, I would suggest getting on Twitter because it's a great way to boost a lot of your Altmetrics and get your research out there, especially if you have research that's open. So if you have research that's not behind a paywall, Twitter is a great way to get that to more and more readers. And again, those numbers will grow. Are there any other questions about where, about what's out there and who's providing Altmetrics? Yes. Okay, so the question was about the repository. If you have something in the repository, I'm guessing in our digital repository here at Iowa State, yes, are you then going to have Altmetrics available for you? So the information that you're going to have is whatever is provided in that author dashboard. So the statistics are going to be the same ones gathered for everyone. Yeah, so Megan will pull up an example here on the screen. I will say, as Megan's looking this up, the digital repository doesn't gather as wide of Altmetrics as some other places do, but you will get downloads, views. You'll also be able to get to see some of that where the traffic is coming from.
Could you just talk a little bit about what the digital repository does? I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, definitely. Sure, okay, so this is a great question. So the question was what does the digital repository do? So one of the things that the digital repository does is it gives open access, so access to anybody. It doesn't live behind a subscription wall or a paywall to your research, which is really nice. So if you have an article that you published in a very traditional journal, and that lives in a database, right, somewhere where only people who subscribe to it can get to it. The digital repository, if that is sort of works out with our license or contract with the art journal that published it in the first place, we can put a version up in the digital repository, and that will be downloadable to everyone.
So, for example, I use Academia.edu.
Yep.
To buy art is probably illegal. I'm not a lawyer. So, could I link to the digital repository instead if I did that and if your lawyers approved it?
Sure. Okay. So the question is, you have stuff up on academia.edu. So academia.edu, one of sort of we'll ignore the legal side of things for now, but one of the benefits of having it in the repository is that it is open, and so not only is it not live behind a paywall, but it is incredibly easy to find on Google and Google Scholar. So academia.edu and ResearchGate, so those are two things that some of you might be familiar with. Those are actually closed systems, so they're not as, did you have a question or? Oh. So they're not as discoverable, but also it's a better way to contribute to the larger research, and it also will take away that sort of legal scare of like, oh, maybe I will get a takedown notice from the publisher who actually published my stuff. All of that permissions checking happens at the digital repository. The staff do that for you. Mm-hmm. Yes, other questions? Kelly, you had a question or comment? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Yeah, so Kelly wanted to also point out that in the digital repository, you can connect through that company that's called Altmetrics, so you can get your official capital A Altmetrics score. So in addition to the dashboard, it will also provide that. Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, the repository links to Altmetric. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, you can answer the question.
So Altmetric and also a company called Plum sell special, very expensive Altmetric services. Right now we have a free license with them to integrate it with our repository. So we do not have the Altmetric paid service. They give us a free license to link our articles on the repository, but we don't have you can't go to their website, unfortunately, right now. So.
Yeah, so you as an individual couldn't go to Altmetric and then like gather all of the Altmetrics for you as a researcher, and we're going to get into some tools that actually you can do that with in just a minute. Are there any other questions? I know it's sort of a lot of pieces together. I think one of the easiest ways to think about things is to take a moment to reflect and think of where you actually have research, where is that living, and then consider, is there something that's gathering Altmetrics already for you, whether it be Altmetric, the capital A company. If you're in something like academia or .edu or ResearchGate, consider the possibility that there's very well a chance that you could put your stuff in the digital repository. It's a nicer system. It does a better job of contributing to the open access movement, to providing access to a larger group of people. And honestly, you'll just get way more hits. So, yeah.
Do you think the wave of the future is journals using Altmetrics? Because my concern as a pre-tenure person is, I've asked people to retweet my article, but the dean doesn't care. So, in order to make the dean care, I think having journals do that helps, right? So if a publisher is endorsing the system, so I was wondering if you all think that's going to start happening, where it's not up to each of us to promote our work in these platforms, but publishers have endorsed these too. I'm trying to.
Sure, yeah, so I'll just repeat the question. So the question was, thinking about the future, will more journals go into that sort of first tab that we looked at with publishers who provide Altmetrics, especially when you consider things like tenure cases and, yeah, chairs and deans, right, not really caring about retweets. I guess I'll kind of speak for Megan and I when I say yes. I think, especially now that most journals exist online, they want to do the best job that they can as journals and as the publishers who own those journals to gather a lot of that data for you, because it's also good for them as a journal, right? So if down the road when you're considering whether to publish in one journal or another, an added plus of one journal would be, well, they will provide me with all of this Altmetrics that the other journal won't.
They have to decide, are they going to have to pay the money to Altmetrics PM, or are they going to hire someone in-house or several people to do this? Okay, interesting.
and DOIs, which are now attached to articles, right, the digital object identifier, that really helps with a lot of this because that maintains the same, right? So your journal article has that as it moves through all of these systems, so it's really just a matter of throwing the net to catch all of those. Mm-hmm.
Is there any research out there to kind of show how one correlates to the other one?
Yeah, definitely. So the question was regarding citations. So like, are you thinking of a more traditional like citation impact and between that and Altmetrics? I mean, definitely high cited journal articles are also gaining a lot of these Altmetric things, right? Like, they would be tweeted more because they're cited more. I think this isn't necessarily just another option, right? Like, don't worry about your citation and get a high Altmetric score. It's really one and the same, right? Looking at this as a huge picture and saying, well, I can already know my citation count for my journal. Here's this whole other piece of information that I might not have been looking at before and that I should.
In the Altmetrics top 100 list for 2013 are behind paywall. So you can get a sense for what kind of articles are being listed here and how much might actually be consumed as content rather than just being tweeted about or posted about by somebody on social media.
I can address that a little bit too. Sorry, we've just changed speakers for those who are on the webinar version of this. I am a tenured professor. I've been through tenure at a couple different universities now, and what you're seeing is the conversation changing in every discipline right now to figure out exactly that question and how much does it mean or not mean in your profession. One of the things about the digital repository, there has been research showing that the more open your article is, the much more likely you are to be cited. It has driven up the citation numbers. So if you think of it a little bit in that context as well, the one thing that is really nice to me as an author about Altmetrics is I see whether someone's talking about my content before it's ever cited. For disciplines that it takes a couple years to get a citation, and some disciplines aren't as fast moving as others, it gives you some kind of information when you're putting in your tenure file that, oh, there has been quite a bit of chatter about this, or there's been silence on the web about this. It tells you at least something. It's not going to replace citations ever, I don't think. But it's kind of like complementary scholarship in a way that it informs your conversation a little bit more than what you would have if you didn't have the Altmetrics. Yes?
A quick question. Something that I use Academia.eu, what I like about it as a feature that I can follow a researcher. So anytime that researcher posts something to their account, I get a notification. So I follow top researchers in my field. Can I do this with digital repository? I can track top researchers?
Yep, and you can also, in the digital repository, you can also
Yeah, so the question was about following specific researchers. So services like Academia is more, Academia.edu is more of that social network concept, right, where you can follow one researcher and then get notifications. So you can do that with the digital repository. You can also follow specific disciplines. So I get a report as the librarian for human development and family studies. I get a report every, 2 weeks or something. That's all of the new publications that have gone up in the repository. I mean, it's still a little bit limiting, right, because there could be things that haven't gone up in the repository. And in that case, I just rely on Google Scholar alerts. Great, good question.
Okay, for those of you who haven't noticed, we have a little bit of knowledge in the room. That Megan and Emma are really good at some of the newer stuff, and I've got a little bit more of the traditional background. So when you ask a newer question, it's probably going to go to one of them. But so we want to move on and actually talk about how you actually start making Altmetrics work for you. And this is a part where I called you take the data, you make it jump up and dance for you, essentially. So we're going to introduce you. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit to two tools that we're going to talk about are ORCID ID. And then I'm going to talk about ORCID ID, and then Emma's going to come back up here and chat about Impactstory. So essentially, what ORCID ID is designed to do here is help you collect all of your scholarly output or record in one place. If you've got some stuff that's been published and you've got it in EndNote, you've got some other stuff over here in this other system, ORCID ID is really well designed for people with common names, people with names very similar to somebody else in their discipline. It gives them a unique identifying number for their scholarly work. And one of the things I really like about ORCID ID in particular is that it doesn't have to be a published article. It doesn't have to be a book. It can be anything. So if you've got a data set hanging out there, if you have a video, yeah, you can do some YouTube stats, but it's a way to collect all of your activities under one ID, and then that is fed into some of these Altmetrics systems that we're going to talk about a little bit more. It essentially helps you collect all of that information, sort of in a one-stop shopping, if you will. So we're going to start by creating an ORCID ID, and then talk about actually consolidating your Altmetrics in a little bit better fashion. This is on the guide. All I did here on the original guide is to actually go ahead and click on a sample ORCID ID. I kind of like this one because Josiah is fictitious. He's been around for a long time, but he is a myth. And on the left side of the screen, what you're seeing is information about the individual. On the center on the right gives you a little bit of a biography, whatever he chose to put there, or his student, what do you call it, his ghostwriter chose to put there for him. And I love this topic, psychoceramics. One of the things that I like to use this for is to illustrate it doesn't matter what your discipline is. This works for every discipline. Okay, it's you collecting your information. You can choose to put employment history here or not. I encourage it, especially if you've moved from one institution to the other. You've got some pieces that you've authored at one institution, you've gone to another institution, you've got other works, and you can put them all together essentially in this fashion. They also have a section, and this is the main purpose here, is to collect all of the works by this individual in one location. And some of it you can draw from other sources. You can draw from a Scopus author identifier, you can draw from a researcher ID, and you can input stuff manually. So you're not relying on it being in a database somewhere and known about in order to be included in this list. You can put your twin sister's birthday on the list if you really want to. It really doesn't matter. It's up to you as you construct your IDs. I want to jump up real quick and show you one more example here, which is, I should have put the link in here, sorry. You can search for anyone at the top of the screen that you want to see if they have an ID. And I deliberately chose Francesca here because of one added feature that she has also put in here. She chose to put a birth date in there. I probably wouldn't do that, but I'm a little more sensitive to that. But it is whatever you choose to put here. Below employment, and she's moved around a little bit, is a category that is included in every profile. And you can choose to put something there or not. It's funding. You can link out. If you've got an NEH grant, you can link out to that grant and list it here. So it will then collect information for you as this is incorporated in other Altmetrics systems. So there is a rumor out there that one of the larger granting agencies in the U.S. federal is looking at requiring ORCID IDs for every applicant. So if you get one now, you're a little ahead of the game, so to speak.
How is this different from your CV?
So how is this different from the CV? That's a great question. In part, you can turn around and plop this into other systems to identify all your stuff together. Other systems can use the ID. This system actually, you can use a Scopus identifier, and it pulls all of the citations into the system for you automatically based on that number. So your CV, you can list stuff there, but it's not connecting out to things on the internet necessarily and pulling data in for you the way some of the systems are that we're going to do today. Yes? The difference between ORCID and Google Scholar. Close. Google Scholar only will let you put stuff in your list that it can find on its website or that you put in your profile for it. I think one of the advantages of ORCID ID is that it's read by some other systems, although you can read Google Scholar things as well. And when we get into this, you'll see the kinds of material you can put in and the flexibility, I think, in this is much better than what Google Scholar provides. And you can actually populate your profile here using Google Scholar as well.
Also, Google's a corporation and this is open source. So
very good point. Very good point. Google could go away tomorrow. This is open source. This is free. It was created by the people, one of the people involved in this are the people who created Researcher ID using the Web of Science system, which was pretty restrictive. This is open, it's out there. And you don't have to be an employee to have an account. You don't have to contact somebody else to change your account. You can manipulate that for you. And you're right, Google Scholar will let you do quite a bit of this as well. I think one of the differences in some cases are how much you can edit that information as well as who's using that information. Yes?
There is an ORCID that large for-profit publishers like Elsevier also encourage authors to create. Is this ORCID different?
This is the same ORCID. A lot of big publishers are encouraging you to create those because in part they're linking out. And they can then be sure that this article that you wrote in 2012 is the same person who wrote this other article in 2010, but because the journal formatted differently, the journal may have formatted their author name slightly differently, they don't have any other way of telling that that's the same person unless you can connect the dots with that ID. Yes?
I'm the campus administrator for the program Pivot, which is a search tool for funding. And they have a section called Profiles, and they just recently made a system that will bring in your ORCID profile into the Pivot system. So this integrates everything.
So for those of you who are online, there is a campus pivot system that does help you integrate all of your content if you're using the ORCID ID. So yet another reason to use it. When it first came out, I wasn't real thrilled with it, to be honest. It has some limitations, I think, in formatting. It's not real pretty, obviously, on the screen. But I think as you start to play with it, you'll discover that it can be pretty fun. So let's, as we've been talking, I was hoping a few of you might have already gone ahead and registered for an ORCID ID. It's very fast, it's very easy. It doesn't cost a thing. Type in a few things like how you want your name, your email address. You don't even have to go to your email and verify anything. It just creates it on the fly for you. And then you can just start adding content to it. Yes, question?
There's only so much room on your CV or whatever. If I want to change that because I'm not really trying to do this education thing, I'm trying to do this other thing, does it all come through on ORCID, or do you have explicit control?
You have explicit control, and that's actually what I have up on the screen at the moment is what the editing screen looks like. And I just want to point out real quickly that notice you can link works automatically from some systems that are out there, including Researcher ID or Scopus. You can, whoops, I hate it when it does that. I got to learn not to use the back button. You can add work manually, and BibTeX is where you can pull from Google Scholar or some other systems that you use where you can download it as a BibTeX file and you can add it in. But when you add work manually, the reason I want to show you this is to show you the variety of stuff you can put in here. You can put publications and conference and stuff like that. They have a lovely other category, and when you pick other, it gives you the option to choose some other kinds of formats than what the traditional types of formats are, but you can still pick other. And even when you do that, the boxes on the screen are not changing any. Where this system really excels, I think, I encourage people to type in a title. If it's a journal article, obviously the journal title, the year, and then the identifiers over on the right are really what connect it to other things like Altmetrics. So if you've got a DOI for an article, you can go ahead and choose to type in the DOI. Or if it's a book and you have an ISBN, you can go ahead and put in that ISBN. And that's what the systems are talking about when it's exchanging data back and forth, is those unique identifiers that you're attaching to it.
This is Megan. I just want to add a quick note that ORCID is not a replacement for a resume. ORCID is a place to register everything you have ever done and keep it in one place and make sure other systems know you were an author on it. There are other tools, one of which we're going to get into shortly, that can act as a resume supplement or replacement. But ORCID is just a registry. It's a way to say, yes, I did this. This is where it is and where you can find it.
But it doesn't check whether you have copyright.
So ORCID does not host, so the question was, how does copyright interact with ORCID? And ORCID does not host documents. It literally just hooks up systems. It says, this person with this ORCID ID number authored this article with this DOI, and this is where you can find it. It's a system to interlink everything on the web because otherwise you have to do that manually. So this helps automate those processes. Does that help?
So I'm trying to kind of like, how would this work for me as a grad student that starting to apply for jobs, say I want to post a lecture, video of my lecture, so people can see how I actually track the students?
Okay, so the question was, how do I post a video of my lecture? And actually that segues into what we're going to cover next. So if you guys haven't registered for an ORCID ID, I'm going to suggest you do it. You can keep doing it now. Raise your hand if you have questions. But we're also going to transition into Impactstory, which excels at things that are better than like traditional publications and showing people where those are and what the impact is and what they do. So, are there any other questions about ORCID before we switch?
It's like it's nice how it gives you a URL, so that in your departmental profile you can put that URL in, and you're not updating two different things.
Yeah, so ORCID is a way where you only have to update one thing. That's exactly right. And one of the nice things is, like we said, its ability to link. And so that's why grant funders love it. They can click it. They don't have to guess, are you the person that was at Ohio State last year and now you're at Iowa? Or was that a typo? I've actually had AT&T confuse those two states. So that happens. So ORCID is one of those things that people like because it says, yes, this is that person, this is their name, this is what they published, this is what they researched, this is how you can find them if you need to. If you think you don't want people to find you, you can hide that information as well. So if you can go back to the guide, we're going to transition into Impactstory. And Impactstory's slogan right now is your CV but better, and I happen to agree with this. And what Impactstory does is it takes all these different places you can get Altmetrics and it tries to bring them into one unified dashboard. It can't get everything because we talked about how like ResearchGate and academia.edu are closed systems, so it can't get those. But what it can get is everything that's public. Twitter, YouTube, anything the company Altmetric, capital A, captures can go in there too. Mendeley, things like that. So you guys, it is a paid service, but I want to just emphasize that it is the cost of a sandwich a month. And so if you think about the data you're going to get from them for $5 a month, it's pretty worth it. And I have some example profiles on the left I'm going to go through. The first one is actually a career scientist. He's not even a faculty member. So I'm going to look at Keith's profile. And he has a cute little synopsis at the top about who he is, about, you know, open science, the Oxford comma, and milk before tea. So it doesn't sound very serious. But then you start looking at what he's done. And so open access, he's made 84% of his work open access. That means there's no paywall barrier between readers and his work. So that means probably his Altmetrics and maybe his citations will increase over time as well. Then we get down to the key profile metrics. And we see that not only are a lot of people seeing him on Twitter, he's interacting with a lot of people too. So this looks huge, right? 563.8K Twitter impressions. If you hover over that, it explains what that is a little, because it's a little misleading. What that is because Twitter's an open system and you can choose people to follow, what that says is people that follow him then can have pushed out his tweets. And so that many people have the potential to have seen what he has done on Twitter. That is a huge number, by the way. And those phylogenetics, genome biology, Figshare, those are people that have retweeted his work. And how many follows each of them have. So, but then you see 6.9K views on his articles. That's also huge. You hover over that, you're seeing where it's coming from. So PLOS, HTML views, those are the actual articles that they're reading online. The Figshare views are data that are attached to his articles that they're viewing. PLOS PDF views, so the people that have downloaded the PDFs to get to the article. Figshare downloads, they've downloaded either his figures or his graphs from Figshare. And Impactstory views, he's actually hosted PDFs on Impactstory and they found it on Impactstory. So that's pretty neat. And if you look on the left, this different menu over here, he has all sorts of stuff on here. Lots of this you wouldn't be able to put on a normal CD or it might be overlooked. But now that it's all here, it's all treated equally, I can explore it. So slide decks, for example. Something, you know, maybe conference presentation. Well, this comes both highly recommended and highly viewed. That +6 is just in the last week. So let's take a look at it. Takes a little while to update everything, because it's talking to other systems. So that's why this system excels. Remember we were talking about how everything talks to everything else? That's what it's doing now, and hopefully it's going to load. I may have to go to a different one. I will also say Impactstory is a grant-funded nonprofit. They are entering the last year and a half of their grant funding, so they want to set up a sustainable model, which is why it is the $5 a month model right now. And they are constantly tweaking and upgrading it, so I'm hoping they're not doing that right now. Let's try something else. We'll see if we can get a data set to load. There we go. There's some nice metrics. So this data set shows that, you know, 147 people, well, I guess one person could have viewed it multiple times, looked at this data set on Figshare, which hosts the data. And that 3 people actually downloaded it. And that 644 people probably saw a tweet about this on Twitter. And then once it, you know, one person within Figshare shared it. Someone bookmarked it in Delicious, so, which is kind of dying, so that's kind of funny. So if some of you might remember Delicious. He also has his thesis on here. And I believe I can load, oh, he hasn't made that one available on the full text. But if you have a profile with them, you can actually upload the full text in here. It's the same deal as the repository in academia.edu, though. You need to judge if it's legal to do that. So, but it gives you an option to do that. It also gives you, let's go back to one of his articles. Oh, let's see, this one's brand new. Let's look at this one. So that is a lot of numbers right there. And let's look at the summary of the metrics. Here we go. So the nice thing it does on the right is it gives you this percentile, 99th percent. It tells you compared to other articles in 2014, this is, you know, not bad. And if you click into it, it'll tell you how they calculate all this. It's a pretty neat tool. So at this point, we have a few minutes that I want to actually have you guys set up a sample profile and see if you guys can get some of these things to hook up and see if you like what you're seeing or if you have questions about what you're seeing. So on the guide, we have sign up for a 30-day trial. And go ahead and put in your name, email, and password, and you can go ahead and start making a profile. So.
Do you know how popular this is so far? So when people Google you, what are the chances this is going to come up higher? Because that's an advantage of academia.edu.
Yeah.
That people can find you really easily on Google.
So the question was, how easy is it to find Impactstory profiles? And I would say right now, it kind of depends on you. There's a lot of the people who have profiles right now are early adopters. And so you might be able to find, I know at least one of them is very findable, but it depends. And I think that's one of the things they're going to start working on is actually pushing the system out and making it more visible. So while you guys are doing the sign up process, I'm going to sign into my account and show you what the edit screen looks like.
Okay, this is Lori again real quick. I just wanted to add in one of the questions we get related to promotion and tenure and Altmetrics, excuse me, that I forgot to mention earlier is a lot of these Altmetrics are dynamically generated on the fly, which is what Megan was showing as she was trying to load the page, because it's going out there and retrieving all that data, which means downloading it into a report is really not something that's going to be possible because it's generating it on the fly. So if you're going to try and put it in some kind of a report or collect that information in some way, your best bet is probably something that's going to do like a screen capture of some sort, or pulling that data manually into some kind of Excel file. Most of these will not provide a reporting feature for you along those lines because of that dynamic system.
So I'm going to show you guys inside my profile. Once again, don't judge me. I'm what you would call an early career researcher. I've only been a librarian for about a year and a half. I have a paper that has been approved for publishing. It has not yet come out. Even then, or even without that, Impactstory has actually given me a lot of value and has shown me a lot of things I would never have found. One of which is that I have this slide deck that is getting kind of a ridiculous number of views. It's been viewed over 550 times. Library science is not that big of a community, so that's actually rather impressive for some of us. And what's kind of neat is if I click full text, because this is hosted on SlideShare, it just loads it up right away. And anyone who, if I send anyone to my profile, they don't have to dig around to try and find what's there. It's right there. It loads right up. It'll do the same thing. So I have a couple of videos on YouTube, and it does the same thing. So I did like a interview, and so it's telling me, 4 people, that's what have seen it on Impactstory, which is what the little I means. And actually those 4 were all within the last week. And then once again, a delicious bookmark, so we'll ignore that. It says full text, but it's actually the video. And if I push play, it'll actually play the video right there. So once again, I'm not having to dig around and log into YouTube to see what's going on. Anyone who's looking at me doesn't have to dig around on all these different products to find me. It's all here. It's unified. You can list pretty much anything you want in here. So I have a web page in here. I can't gather stats on web pages, but people can find it through here, which is useful. So it's already showed me that one person, once again, someone was delicious happy on my profile. I want to know who this person is. It's kind of entertaining. They bookmarked everything I did, I think, all like 6 things. It's not my mom. I don't know who you are, but I love you. It's cracking me up, yeah. So, they can just click it. I put in a little abstract about what my little website was about, and then, they can go straight to the website I built, which was another guide like the one we're looking at now. So it's this really neat service, and it's actually, another thing I want to emphasize is this is the only service that provides a unified dashboard for you as a person to gather all of this. All the other alternatives out there are trying to sell them at an institution level. I will say those are in thousands of dollars because we got a quote from one and we were like, oh, that's nice. No. So this is actually a pretty good deal, and you can cancel it at any time. Like I said, you get that 30-day trial. If you like it, or maybe you think you need more than 30 days, actually email Impactstory. They'll probably extend your trial for you up to a year. So, and because I'm in there, I want to show you what they should send me every week. This is an email I got today. So this is an email I got from them that you can choose how often you get them. I think I said weekly, so I get one every week. And it tells me, I have a total of 63 YouTube views, and 7 of them are new this week, and congratulations, I passed the 60 mark. So that's kind of fun. I have a total of 100 tweets. I don't use Twitter that much, so that number is pretty low. And I now have, congrats, I'm passing the 100 mark. I mean, so it's kind of this fun little thing you get. It's also telling you, yeah, I did that. It's reminding you of all the things you did, because I would forget about half the things I did otherwise. And it goes through all the things I have on there. Okay, delicious. You can stop now. So it's just kind of fun. So that's it's like I said, they're also working to improve this. So if you have questions about it, email that team. They're really responsive. You can also contact me or Emma, because I'm technically an Impactstory advisor, so I'm like the contact point for the campus. So you can ask me about it too. And let's see, let's go into Keith's profile. Or no, wait, we did Keith. Let's go into Christopher's. So Christopher is also a fairly new researcher. I think he got his PhD the last 2 years, though he was a researcher before he completed his PhD. So as you can see, most of his impacts are on articles. He's mostly an article-driven researcher, and Impactstory is still providing him with a wealth of information. So mine had other things. I had websites, videos, all sorts of stuff. Well, this is articles. He's still getting quite a lot of information on just articles. So let's check out one of them. Okay, the abstract's huge. But what I really am interested in is some of these. Oh, look at that. There's the full text right there. That was kind of handy if I want to read it. But let's look down into the metrics. So he has 7 Scopus citations. So it's telling me citations right away, which is nice. So Impactstory can interact with Scopus and Mendeley and Twitter and all these other things, and that's its strength. 5 people, probably including me now, have actually seen this paper on Impactstory. They found it through his profile. This is how many people, once again, Twitter impressions is kind of odd, but it's a combination of how many people follow you and you follow and how many times it's retweeted and things like that. If you look into it, you can get a bit more details about how they calculate that. It's kind of idea of the size of the community you are participating in is what I would call it. And also maybe how active you are in that community. So he also has peer reviews on here, which is new. Publons is a new service that lets you, how do I say this, take credit for reviews, which is something that was invisible work as an academic. So Publons now ties into Impactstory. It can only display publicly the ones that you've made public, which means the paper you reviewed must have been published, and you have to be okay with saying that you reviewed it. They verify with the editor to make sure that you actually did it too. So it links into those. And I can go and read the review. So. And you don't have to actually post what your review comments were. You can just say, I was one of the reviewers of the article. Depending on the research community you're in, this is either more accepted or not. It depends. But it's a new way to do it. For example, mine, I just have that I reviewed 7 articles. It only said what journal they're in, nothing else. Because of that, it's not showing up on Impactstory right now. So.
Do you think this could change having a professional website? It seems like it's a big for graduate students.
So the question was, can Impactstory replace a professional website? I would say yes. Depends on how you want to use it. Impactstory can host PDFs right now and not much else. So if you have image-heavy stuff, you would have to embed it into a PDF probably, which is a little awkward. But if you just want to do a basic profile of yourself as a researcher, this is a really handy tool because it does hook up with all these other systems. It's going to summarize citations and all these other information. This is all I have right now, and I've been really happy with it so far. So has anyone actually started making a profile and testing it out? Okay, maybe not. So okay, so we're going to do, this is the hands-on part where we play around with this tool. I can show you how to do things in my profile, so I think one of the things I should show you is to find mine. If I go back to this screen, I can actually add things, except I think it's not. I'm wondering if it somehow logged me out. So let's see if I can get it to work. There, now I'm logged in. So if I click the little plus, it's import things, and this is kind of cool. So now you can see all the different services Impactstory can automatically hook up with. Figshare, which is a place that hosts data sets and figures. A lot of publishers are partnering with Figshare, and actually your supplementary information, when you do a journal article, is now hosted by Figshare. And that's cool because now you're getting Altmetrics tied to it because Figshare is open that way. They share it so you can get them through tools like Impactstory too. GitHub as well. So if you do coding, you can connect your GitHub. If someone's forked off of your project, it will track all that. You can see how many other projects have come off of it. Google Scholar, the reason it's blue is because it doesn't hook up completely. You can tie your Impactstory account to Google Scholar in that it will put a little badge and people can easily click it and get to your Google Scholar profile. It is not dynamic. It does not update. That's something Impactstory team would love, but I think Google has actually put the kibosh on that and they can't do it. Publons, there's ORCID right there. So if you have your whole publishing history in ORCID, you don't have to re-enter it here. It'll import it. The question was, how do you turn them on? So let's do GitHub. So it asked me to log into GitHub. I'm not sure if I remember my GitHub username. I actually have one. I don't have any code, so I didn't link it. But you just log in, hit the little connect, and then a little wheel will spin to Depending on how much stuff you have in there, it might take a while for the little wheel to stop spinning. So, and it tells you automatic import available. So same thing with Twitter, SlideShare, and this list will probably grow as different companies start offering this as a, like open their data, start pushing it out and sharing it. Like Publons just came on this week, that's new. But what if I have something that's not supported by these? Well, it's actually pretty easy. I just add products individually by ID. And how they define ID is pretty broad. So if you have PubMed articles, you can put in the PubMed IDs, article DOIs, dataset DOIs, GitHub repos, web page URLs, that's how I got my little web page on there, slide decks, and then if you have YouTube or Vimeo videos, you just put the URL in there and it'll import not only the video, so you get that preview, all the views and data from that come in too. So it's pretty easy. So let's actually do this. I'm going to add this website, because I authored it. I'm going to add this to my Impactstory. We'll see. And there it goes. It's finding data. Unfortunately, it's not going to find data for my website. But look at that. Web pages went from 1 to 2. And there it is right there. It put in a different title, but that's fine because I can click it. And I don't know, it looks like the code's a little broken on this page. So normally you would be able to click into here and then edit all the fields. It looks like they're working on something today and it's not working. So hopefully if you guys come back, it'll work. Is it just loading? Okay, we'll give it a little while. So usually it's a little better than this. So yeah, Emma's gonna add a comment.
Yeah. So I was thinking more about your question about the future, right? Like thinking about the future. So I think one of the things that Megan highlighted a bit in the beginning, but it's helpful to come back to, is one of the goals of Altmetrics is the realization that research ought to be and is becoming more open. So we're slowly, as researchers, as scholars, as librarians, slowly getting paywalls to fall down. And as that's going forward, we're thinking if everything is available to everyone all the time, even the public who might not be creating citations but is using your work to, further human knowledge, how do we capture that? So also, if you're looking into those things like GitHub, like SlideShare, and you don't yet have accounts in those, I would really consider some of the ones that might be beneficial in your area, because the more that you can add to open knowledge, to public knowledge, the higher your Altmetrics will be, but also the more your research will be out there, which is in the end sort of the goal. So.
Even with traditional publishing venues, often they'll ask you, what are you going to do to promote this research?
Right.
So this is so we have more and more avenues to do that, which I think can be really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and traditional publishers are thinking about this too. I mean, we've seen large journals and publishers also reconsider their open access policies. So, yeah, it's definitely growing.
I actually forgot. Do any of you have extension appointments or pursuing jobs with extension appointments? Okay, so this is actually really important, is that Altmetrics is one of the only ways to track reach and perhaps the impact of some extension publications, because those aren't going to be tracked the same way as other peer-reviewed citations are. Those are not going to get indexed in Web of Science. They're probably not going to get indexed in Scopus. But if you have 100-something views of a data sheet you put out that people are actually using, that's an Altmetric, that it was downloaded 100 times or maybe 500 times. That's something that, people are using it. And for extension work, that's what you want. You want things to get used. So does anyone else have questions about Altmetrics, about some of the tools we've gone through, about citations and questions about that?
Since you mentioned extension, do you happen to have any examples of, any other extension services that are using Altmetrics?
So the question was, do I know of any other land-grant extension units using Altmetrics? And right now I would have to say it's early adopters. So it's not at an institution level, it's at an individual or a project level. Impactstory is actually thinking about creating not just personal profile pages, but project profile pages. So for example, if you have a grant and you're pushing out like a whole bunch of publications, maybe you're doing videos to explain, you're doing the outreach part, you're doing videos and lectures, you can all track that in one place as well. And so right now you have to report those individually, you know, like I gave a presentation, 250 people attended. Yeah, exactly, no one wants to do that. So if you do, you could do that, but then you could also say, and I published it free online, and it had, you know, a couple thousand views, so other people are using it too.
Well, I would say that I think we'd love to be that institution that does that as far as Altmetrics and extension goes. I think that could be us.
Yeah, Emma's comment was that Iowa State should be first, so you guys should all do it. So Altmetrics, the trick with it is getting everything hooked up. So if you have DOIs for your journal articles, that's fantastic. If your data has a DOI, that's fantastic. So some of the other things we have on the guide on this Make Altmetrics Work For You tab on the right are some recommended tools and services that do a really good job of hooking up your stuff with other things, like your ORCID ID. So for example, Figshare and Dryad both assign DOIs to data and figures and whatever you deposit in there. That's a permanent ID. It's like your ORCID. It's like a barcode. It's unique to that item. And that means that any link to that item goes to one place. That's really important when you do Altmetrics because, you know, it's really easy to get lost on the web. I do Google Scholar searches all the time. I do not find what I'm looking for. I have to go dig around in 4 other databases to actually find it. Then I have to actually dig around to find the full text. The DOI is like a magic number, automatically brings me to the full text, right? So anything you have that has an identifier that's unique is going to really help with tracking Altmetrics and hooking up all these services together. Are any of you actually publishing data? Oh, I can hear the crickets. Are any of you interested in publishing data? More crickets. Oh, we had 1 person maybe? 2 people? Okay. I'll just say I have an article coming out and we plan to publish the data set with it. It will be going in a repository, so it will be open access. And we're hopefully going to get an identifier on it, so we'll be able to track things with it as well. Data is now being considered a research project either on par with some of the papers it is related to or better, depending on how it is reused. And a lot of the granting agencies are also looking at data as being very valuable for reuse. So how do you cite data? There's actually an ongoing debate about how you cite data, and if it was a project database, how many different authors do you stick on it? Well, so if, you know, think about the Hadron Collider, right? How many different people were on those papers? Have you looked at those? A couple hundred. So that's why DOIs are really handy. You can just cite the DOI for these things instead of sticking every single person's name on there. You get these identifiers. It helps, makes things simple. So not only is it going to save, it's going to be, you know, instant. You know exactly who participated. You can find them. You find more about them. It'll hook up. So if you do software, this is also important. Citing software is also a little goofy. You can have thousands of people using the software. You're not going to get any citations or be able to prove impact unless someone writes a paper on it. Yeah, there's been a lot of papers on, you know, Google products, but they're nowhere near the number of people actually using them. So judging the effect of a piece of software is not going to be something you can do via citations. These are the things we're thinking about when we start talking about Altmetrics. It's some of these tools. Any other questions? No, ORCID is for you to list what you've done. Impactstory, academia.edu, things like that, things that actually host things, that's where you have to decide if it's legal for you to post a copy of your manuscript. So ORCID is just a way of saying, this is me, this is everything I've done. It's just a directory. It's like a personal phone book page. that tells other people what you've done.
Yeah, I will add, if you're somebody who's concerned about putting up publications, because it will violate the contract that you signed when you published yours, is if you are in the position to push on your publisher when you seek publication, please, please, please ask if you write out the front that you want to be able to post preprint, post-print. Please ask. We see that we do not have enough researchers who push on those publishers for permission to repost.
So Emma just related that if you're publishing and you wanted to put your work outside of a paywall, you can put pressure on your publishers. You can change your contract you're signing when you publish to include putting it in a repository and things like that. And we can help you with that as well. There are precedents, there are templates we can use to help you.
Great, so Megan and I will stick around. You're welcome to stay in the lab. For those of you who received paper evaluations, if you could just fill that out, drop it off in the back. Stick around if you have questions. Our contact information is on that guide that you had to begin with. If you're online, thank you for joining in. There's an online evaluation form. Please go out, tell your colleagues and your fellow researchers.
Okay.